Good afternoon. So, Noah Yuval Harari wrote the book Sapiens, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, Homo Deus. In his book Sapiens, he said, and I don't agree with everything he says, by the way. I don't think that we're creating an obsolete class with this next industrial revolution. But otherwise, I do think that his ideas around how stories distinguish us from other creatures is very interesting. Because other creatures on the planet evolved over 2.5 billion years of evolutionary history. And it was really the survival of the fittest. Whereas we leapt forward to the top of the food chain in 100,000 years through stories. And stories are how we hold our beliefs. It's how we formed tribes, how we formed societies. Religion's just stories. Money is just a story. Work is a story. Education and healthcare, they're all stories. And stories have brought us through 5 eras of human history. So the first was the hunter-gatherer era, followed by the agricultural revolution, then the industrial era, the information to the computer era, and now we're in the augmented era. Each era was marked by a time period, and you'll notice those time periods are getting closer and closer together. Each era valued a different type of talent. We're kind of stuck between the information and the augmented era, where we look at acquired knowledge and skill. We tend to tell people to get a good job, pick a good major, pick a good concentration, pick a good industry. That's no longer true. The way we use tools was also changed. We use tools for labor efficiency, labor augmentation, labor replacement. And now we're looking at moving from cognitive reduction to cognitive augmentation. In mental models, we're stuck between the Industrial Revolution and the Information Era. In reality, we're already in the Augmented Era. Our relationship with knowledge, in the hunter-gatherer era, we valued generalized knowledge. Then we got more and more specific about what we knew and became very well-defined set experts, and that's opening up again. We also changed our relationship with time. In the hunter-gatherer era, there was no really tomorrow. It wasn't until the agricultural era that we started planning for the next season and the next year. And now we rarely live in the moment we're in. We're always thinking about what's ahead. So as important as stories are, I want to delineate between stories and narratives. So a story is self-contained. As a beginning, middle, and end, it's resolved. You can learn from a story because it has a moral. It holds your belief in your values. Like now that you folks have the bronze medal, that is part of the story of Latvia. But you can't change that story. You're passive. Narratives, on the other hand, are unresolved. Narratives require your engagement. They can be an opportunity. You are active. It can be a call to action. I think right now the stories that we used to believe in around work are falling into the sunset. The narratives are now emerging, and it's up to us to complete them. So that's how I want you to think about this. This is an opportunity for us to write the future. This is our narrative. This is our call to action. So in order to do that, I've organized this into 5 shifts that we have to understand. First is a shift in perspective. Let's look at what's changing around us. Now, of course, technology is the biggest piece. That's where everybody focuses. But we also have massive demographic changes. We have changes in paradigm shifts. And we have some changes around some of our norms. Some of that's a little uncomfortable for folks. We have to look at the behaviors that we want in people. That's where I think we need to focus. Instead of saying we need these skills or we need these kind of workers, what kind of behaviors do we want? What do we want those behaviors in our learners and our leaders? And then how do we shift our mindset to evolve our thinking? How do we tackle this? What approach should we take? And then finally, how do we create the culture to realize our goals? So from a perspective standpoint, paradigm shifts. We're going to talk about paradigm shifts, labor shortages, shifting norms, exponential growth in technology, just briefly, because I think Jared did an amazing job of covering that. And then why it's important now to talk about engaging, thriving, and wellness in a way we never have before. And the existential crisis we just went through caused attitudinal shifts in values and how we look at how we live our lives. So this is a graphic I came up with about a decade ago. And it still works because we're still stuck. Life used to look like this: education, career, retire. 3 discrete bands. Life expectancy was, late 60s. Education was just the first third of your life, and education was a term that we used because it was an end state of being educated. Career was a career ladder. It was set. Education, the only job was to get you on it. You collected a pension and by design died a year later. That's how we picked pension age. Now, this whole model is broken, every bit of it. The success measures here are to be codify and transfer the right predetermined skills and existing knowledge to get you on that ladder. I want you to erase that from your minds. That's where we're stuck. Because now I think it looks like this. Life expectancy is not 90 for everybody yet, but that's the direction we're going in. Learning becomes a huge band, overlapping all the other bands. And I use the word learning instead of education because learning is continuous, whereas education has an end state. Work becomes leverage of that learning because work and learning are now a combined act. And longevity becomes a reality because we didn't plan for, save for, nor can most of us afford, financially, cognitively, or socially, a 30-year retirement. So it looks more like this. And the success measures here is can you learn, adapt, and create new value? Learn, adapt, and create new value. That's what we're going to be doing for the rest of our lives, which will now be much longer. We have shifting demographics, and it changes depending on where you are in the world. We've got longer life expectancy in many countries. We've got declining fertility rates. You folks are, I think, about 1.6. So we have aging societies. Japan is one of the leaders in aging society. Got about 30% of them are pensioners. Monaco is the oldest country in the EU. 55 is the average age. And you folks have about 22% of your people are pensioners. This is a high level of folks that you need to support. Other parts of the world are having an increase in fertility, but their life expectancy isn't moving quite as quickly. So they're having youth booms. So this is Africa, India, and the Middle East, where somewhere in the neighborhood of 60% of people can be under the age of 25 or 30. That could cause huge unemployment problems. Another shift that's taking place, and this is uncomfortable for some folks, is the speed in which gender and sexuality are changing. 6 or 7 years ago, gender was fixed and binary. It's now decidedly fluid, and I'm going to share with you data that is international and 2 years old, so I think it's actually a little bit behind because it was the last time they did a study of this scale. And this is the percentage of folks who identify as something heterosexual or something other than heterosexual by generation. And if you look at these numbers, they're doubling every generation. Why does this matter at a conference talking about education or talking about work? Because these are going to be your students, these are going to be your employers, these are going to be employers' children. These have implications for healthcare policy, how you talk about use of pronouns, bathrooms, etc. And it's a really fast change, faster, I think, than the technology changes, and it makes a lot of folks uncomfortable, but it's something we have to work through. Changes in technology. The pandemic accelerated technology in some really interesting ways. So if you look at a few timelines here, the time it takes for us to hand off tasks to technology. The original model was the Frey-Osborne model that said we'd hand off about 50% of our tasks to technology by 2033. The speed in which we're migrating to the cloud, Accenture said we were about 20% into the cloud prior to the pandemic, with the remaining 80% would take a decade. Digital transformation, we're a little further down the road on that, so we look at 5-year increments. And then vaccine developments, because we just went through a pandemic. Vaccines usually take somewhere between 10 and 15 years. The mumps was 4 years. Polio was 50 years, but 10 to 15 is average. So what's happened? The World Economic Forum says we're handing off things to technology at twice the speed. We may hand off half of our work tasks, those routine tasks that we talked about, to technology by 2025. I find the World Economic Forum a little hyperbolic. I find them a little ahead of things, but we are handing things off to technology more quickly. Accenture said we're migrating to the cloud now at twice the speed. And McKinsey said that we leapt forward 5 years in our digital transformation the first 60 days we went into lockdown. Why was that? Because Zoom had been around for a decade and we all finally started using it. Digital transformation is really human transformation. It's humans using tools that have been around us. Vaccine development. We developed a vaccine in 10 months. How did we do that? We had the genomic sequence for the first time. We had computational immunology. And then we had a global arms race to find a solution. This is a sign of what we're capable of. This is a really good sign. And then since then, ChatGPT and generative AI is the first example of generative AI that people have seen. And the impact of it over the next 10 years, they think, will reach at least more than half of jobs, about 63%, and have a 7% increase on GDP, 10x if we realize our potential as Gert presented. Now, what does this mean? This really means an unprecedented pressure on people to learn and adapt. And we have to acknowledge that pressure is going to be a challenge for folks. We already are feeling some of that change fatigue, and part of our job in learning and work is to help people navigate through that change fatigue. How are we doing on engagement? Not good, folks. Not good. Europe is the lowest in the world right now on engagement. And if you think about engagement at work as people rowing a boat, there's really kind of one person rowing the boat. There's 8 people looking around, and there's one person trying to rock the boat and get off of it. And if you look at this over time, we've made some nominal improvements on engagement. Here in Europe and in Latvia, you folks are doing a better job on thriving. You're doing a better job of prioritizing your life over work than we are in the US. Across the board, we have a rise in negative emotions. If you look at how this has increased from stress, worry, anger, and sadness, this is particularly true in our young people. The rates are almost double. This becomes a real challenge in learning. I think what happened in the pandemic, as people discuss, like, how are we going to go back to the office? When are people going to go back to the office? Are we always going to work at home? Because some industries are still doing that, is to look at what actually happened. And what actually happened, if you look at our lives, and this is sort of the existential crisis I see, is we had our professional lives. And that's how we make our resume or our CV. And then we have our personal lives, and that's really fodder for our eulogy. And we had agency over our personal life. We had control over it. We could do what we wanted in our personal time. And what happened during the pandemic was this. Our personal life became more important because we had an existential crisis. We had agency, we had autonomy, we had trust, and we had accountability. And we learned to navigate. And research shows that folks who have autonomy on their jobs are 79% more engaged than folks who don't. That's something we want to build into every job and build into every learner so they take that accountability. So let's talk about the behaviors that we want. There's a new formula for talent, I think. We need to live in rhythm for resilience, because resilience is going to be an ongoing issue. We need to learn to master our emotions. So the old formula for work used to be, I have a talent. I have a talent for music, I have a talent for numbers, I have a talent for languages. It's evidence capability. I get some sort of credential, degree, training, what have you. That makes me a desirable employee. One and done, right? That's still the mental model a lot of people have. When reality is we need to start with culture. What do I care about? What are my values? What kind of environment do I want to work in? What kind of impact do I want to have in the world? How do I want to express myself? Yes, what are my evidence capabilities? How can I grow them? What's my ability to learn and adapt? What's my learning agility? That is what brings you high-value talent. Because whatever skills you're looking for today, they're going to be different tomorrow. So you want to hire someone who believes what you believe, has some raw talent, and has the ability to learn and adapt, and the drive to do it. So we're completely out of balance in terms of how we live our lives, and it's messing up everything. So the world lives in balance. There's day, there's night, there's high tide, there's low tide, there's seasons, even there's off and on. But what we've done to our environments is we've acclimated so that we can be always on. And we've done that since we had a light source. But what we're doing is we're burning ourselves out. If we never go off, we never get rest. We never get in rhythm. So on average, this is not my screen. You wouldn't want to see my screen. But we're spending about 4 hours on our phone, 12 hours on screens every day. So we're spending more time in a space we're not physically in. And we're touching our phones every 10 to 12 minutes. So I've spoken for about 10 minutes now. You probably have touched your phone at least once. See, people are picking them up. That's how we're living our lives, and it's a continuous partial attention, and it's eroding our ability to concentrate. It's eroding our ability to learn. It's eroding our ability to connect. Microsoft did a study. They wanted to understand this, and this was in the pandemic. If you go from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, what is your ability to concentrate? What is your level of stress? So they took 4 half-hour meetings. These are folks who had no breaks in between those half-hour meetings. They wore EEG head caps. The red and yellow is bad. That's higher levels of stress. These are folks who just had a 5-minute break between those 4 30-minute meetings. They had lower levels of stress, higher levels of engagement. That's how simple some of these things could be. And when we look at learning, we look at both work and learning, we have to look at a model that's, from 1908 actually. And it's the performance pressure model. So we have the comfort zone, we have the panic zone, and we have the stretch or learning zone. We can't live in the learning zone, we can't live in the comfort zone, and we definitely can't live in the panic zone. So we need to vacillate between them. Where we are right now is we're stuck between the learning and the panic zone all the time. It's not making for good efficiency, it's not making for good value, it's not making for a happy society. What we need to do is get better at going from the learning zone to the comfort zone. The comfort zone is where you rest and reflect. So if you think like a marathon runner or a weightlifter, a marathon runner doesn't run marathons all day long. They run a long run one day, a short run the next day. They rest. They have proper nutrition. A weightlifter lifts weights to tear their muscle fibers so they can grow back stronger. That's what we need to do with learning. We need to have periods of reflection where we make sense of the things we've learned. And so we need to develop a rhythm that takes us from the learning zone to the comfort zone. The human battery is at best 16 hours long. So no matter when you sleep, you need that much sleep. It empties the garbage out in your brain. It allows you to rejuvenate. And work isn't necessarily better, but that's how we've been running things. An interesting study with leaders found that leaders who came home, shut down, didn't go to their computer, didn't go to their phone until they went into work the next day, were more energized and more effective, producing higher profitable companies. We don't act like that. We're missing our peak performance. So this is a friend of mine, Alison Levine. She's climbed Mount Everest not once, but twice. She's climbed all 7 peaks in the world. And she says you can be scared and brave at the same time. We avoid our negative emotions, and we don't realize that we can have a negative emotion, embrace it, and push through it. And that's really key to resilience. And Dr. Sven Hansen from the Resilience Institute in Australia says that if you acknowledge your emotions, you have a 50% chance of changing them. If you do not, you only have a 4% chance. Name the emotion, claim the emotion, reframe the emotion. We have to encourage children in school or adult learners to acknowledge their emotional state so that they can make sense of it. Avoiding it is not going to help us anymore. We've done that for too long. So from a mindset standpoint, I think that we should look at education like a Swiss Army knife. I think we should look at how we hire talent like an iceberg. I think we have to realize we're moved from complicated to complex. And I want to talk about the myth of the skills gap in the fourth industrial revolution. So the Swiss Army knife, I think we ought to think about most of our formal education as building the handle that holds the tools. And then adult learning and skills retraining should be about making and dropping new tools. So the kinds of things that I think you need in the handle are foundational knowledge, history, philosophy, ethics, sciences, fundamental literacies, quantitative reason, expression, written, oral, verbal, and visual, computational thinking, only so you can understand what can be computed, not because everybody needs to code. Human behavior, I think is a huge piece of it. Most of what we're going to be doing in work is helping other humans adapt to change. So we need more and more folks who have some fundamental understanding of psychology, sociology, or organized behavior. And then I think we need to push further out on our thinking to make more folks who are good at discovery and exploration, which is probing and propositional thinking. It's things like ethnography, design thinking, prototyping. And then we have to look at how we scale things and the impact we have on them. So everybody has to understand fundamental business models, biomimicry, and public health. And when I look at these things, the tools then become the set expertise that are perishable skills that will change all the time. So those may be occupational specific skills, technical skills that will expire. And when you look at this from a system of education standpoint, I think the foundational knowledge of fundamental literacies in the human behavior is K through 12. So it's through high school. That's where we focus on building the foundation of those skills. The ability to propose something new, scale it, is really university level. And then the lifelong learning comes in with the tools. Some of the tools may come in university as well. But I think that's how we have to start thinking about a new system of education. And when it comes to hiring folks, I think we need to think about it like an iceberg. And we're completely upside down. So we look at what we can see out of the water. Those are the skills. That's the job description. That's what I need you to do today. Chances are good that whatever I'm hiring you to do is going to change. Because I think about it like this. An organization has a need. The organization will say, oh, we need another person, or we need some capabilities in this area. From the time you go from need to over here to need relief, You got to get approval from the budget. Where's it going to sit in the organization? Who's it going to report to? Advertise for the position, select the candidate, bring them in and onboard them. The distance between these two, now those needs are changing. So the job description may not be relevant anymore. And so focusing exclusively on those skills is driving looking in the rearview mirror. Next piece that we need to look at is the human behaviors we want to have. Those are the durable, uniquely human skills that grow with exposure. Creativity, collaboration, communication, empathy, divergent thinking. Below that is a mindset. And you may have heard of growth mindset. I have my own version of it called the agile learning mindset. That's your ability to learn and adapt, particularly to market changes. Because gone are the days where you can say, this is my job over here. I hope it doesn't change. I have no idea what my organization does or how they make value. Not anymore. You need to understand how your organization makes value, what their business model is, how you directly contribute to that value creation, because that business model is going to change, and you need to change with it or ahead of it. And then at the base of the iceberg is understanding your own motivation. We're never going to get people to learn and adapt at the speed, scale, and scope we're going to need through extrinsic pressure. Punishments, threats, and rewards will not work on the scale we're going to need people to learn and adapt. So instead, starting in primary school, we're going to need to help people get in touch with, what am I motivated to do? What do I care about? What am I interested in? What is my sense of purpose? What kind of impact do I want to have in the world? How do I like to express myself? Because that's what's going to drive the whole engine. And we're moving from complicated to complex. So the world used to look like this. It was linear or complicated. Now it's complex. When I speak to CEOs of large organizations, they've always had to manage people with skills and knowledge they don't have. But now I'm finding it's at the middle management where usually your set experts are, and even at the front line in some instances, which means we have to move from individual intelligence to collective intelligence. Because most people who are leading teams right now are leading teams of people who have skills and knowledge they do not. Not only that, they're most likely leading people who don't have duplicate skills and knowledge. So they need to help the people contribute and collaborate on their teams. You just had the coach up here on the screen anyway. That coach didn't get the bronze medal because he could play better than anybody else. He got the best bronze medal because he knew how to bring out the expertise in each and every one of those players so they could be their best collectively. That's how we have to think about learning. That's how we have to think about work. So we've entered the fourth industrial revolution. It's not a good description for everything that's going on. I think Gert's description was far better in a synthetic overview of what's happening. But this is particularly good to think about jobs and skills and training. So the first industrial revolution was mechanical. It was the steam engine. The second was electrical and mass production, division of labor. The third was the internet or computerization, automation of physical manufacturing. And the fourth is the digital convergence of cyber-physical systems, things like the Internet of Things. So the first industrial revolution, you learned a skill. You probably did what your dad did, because back then more men worked than women. Second industrial revolution, it was a little more organized. You probably joined a trade, worked in the family business. The third industrial revolution, where most of us are still stuck, is pick a good major, concentration, industry, or trade, and ride the career ladder up. Career ladder is gone for most of us. We're going to have to forge our own pathways across a web or rock climbing. So now it's learn, adapt, and create new value, because you're going to traverse a multi-industry or a multi-business model web, and you're going to be forging your own path. And we need to give folks the skills to do that. I think the skills gap's never going to close. I actually think that's a good thing. A skills gap forms when a human demonstrates a skill and the market values the skill in excess of supply. By that definition, it's actually progress. So if we assume learning is part of work and learning is lifelong, we'll be in constant pursuit of an ever-widening skills gap. We'll get close to closing it, but we'll never close it. If we close it, we're no longer advancing. So it's important to understand skills on levels. So the first level is competence. That's the ability, I can train you to do something. I can give you tests so to make sure you know the right answer to a well-known question. You can perform a benchmark task to a benchmark level. You can draw on existing knowledge. Well, that's what skilling and reskilling is, and that's going to continue to be important, but let's know it for what it is. Then there's capability. That's the ability to translate your competence to new challenges. That's the ability to translate and deepen your knowledge. That's like getting an advanced degree or certificate. It's still within the realm of known knowledge. That's what upskilling is, and it's going to be important too. But where we need to get more folks to push out and where organizations need to define themselves is by a constant pursuit of increasing their capacity. Capacity is not the ability to do everything, it's the ability to decide what's important and to meet the moment. It's the ability to find and frame new challenges. Gerd used the example that computers are good for answers and humans are good for questions. We've forgotten that. We need to get more people who are in the business of finding and framing those new challenges, formulating those new questions. That's how new knowledge is formed. And I think that underpins what we're in now, which I call the human value era. So let's talk about how we approach this. Transdisciplinarity needs to become a norm. We need to talk about how we formalize that human-to-machine collaboration. And then talk about job sculpting, which is a concept that is 30 years old, but it's finally time, I think, for it to come to light. So we used to train people like this. So we lived in the world of stocks of knowledge. I'm a discipline expert. I'm a journalist. I'm a nurse. I'm a marketing executive. I'm an industrial designer. And then in the 90s, we transformed into this, multidisciplinary. These are people who are T-shaped thinkers, so they can have a discipline expertise, but they can collaborate with people who are adjacent to them. But now I think where we need to get to is transdisciplinary, and it's not just different human disciplines, but it's a combination of human and machine collaboration as well. They call this the I to the T to the X. This is a concept or a schema I came up with for generative design when I first saw it, which is about 10 years ago. And it takes basically a design process, how you propose and create something that doesn't exist. A new pair of glasses, a new pair of shoes, a new building, a new chair. First, you define what you're doing. Define the scope of what you're doing. It's the question. It's defining the question. And then you draft some options for the answers to that question. Then you curate what's the best of those options, and you get input from other people. And then you prototype them to say, okay, how would this actually work? And then you refine it further. And then you optimize it for scale or for production. And then you start all over again because it teaches you what you need to know the next time you create that thing. Now, if you take those steps and you say, okay, where does the human play and where does the machine play? The machine starts playing here. So if you think about like ChatGPT, you ask ChatGPT a question, it produces the first, roll of dialogue, and then you curate out of that, and you refine it. You go back and forth between the human and the machine, and then the human learning loop looks like this. So humans need to get better at defining, humans need to get better at curation, and humans need to get better at making meaning, whether it's an article, an advertisement, a chair, a building, a new process. I think this fundamental framework, we might use slightly different words, is a way we're going to think about machine learning loops and human learning loops and how we work together. So this idea of what's called DELI, deeply embedded life interest, was presented by Tim Clark at Harvard in the 1990s. I remember when I first saw it, I thought, that's so cool. He said every job can be broken down into 8 DELIs, or some combination of them. So say you're very interested in application and technology or quantitative analysis, theory and conceptual development, creative production, counseling and mentoring, managing people and relationships, enterprise control, sort of running the ship, or influence through language of ideas. Now let's take a couple of jobs and look at them in terms of these DELIs. So if you're a salesperson, you probably like to manage people and relationships and you like enterprise control. If you're a human resource person, you probably like counseling and mentoring and managing people and relationships. If you're a CEO or a CFO, quantitative analysis and running the ship. If you're an entrepreneur, maybe creative production and enterprise control. Hey, if you're a keynote speaker, you might like theory and develop conceptual thinking and then influencing through language and ideas. Every job in the world, I think, can be broken down into some formulation of these 8 basic concepts. And we might eventually start at a very young age helping people figure out what are the kinds of things I'm interested in, because the jobs are going to change. Job descriptions may soon be completely irrelevant. Jobs are definitely going to change, but these fundamental life interests are still going to be the drivers, I think. So let's talk about culture. We've been focused on outputs of culture for a long time. I think we need to focus on inputs, trust, psychological safety, and a pretty profound shift in how we pick our leaders. So the outputs of a company are brand and product and service being interchangeable. But what those things really are, or external expressions of the company inputs, which are called assuring capacity. Every organization should be focusing on the inputs. How do I create the conditions in this organization for my people to thrive? And then how do I help them continuously improve their capacity and thus our organizational capacity to respond to the inevitable unknown challenges that are going to face us? And how do I do that is by looking at individuals from what is this person passionate about? Purpose? What do they feel their purpose is? What are they curious about? What are their values? What is their human potential now? Are they interested in expanding it? Because really what we're talking about is a shift from the what, which is really just an exhaust from the organization, to the why and how. When we focus on the why and how, when we focus on the inputs, whether it's at the individual level or the organizational level, we are much more agile and nimble to respond to the unknown. Trust. Everything begins and ends in trust. This is Frances Fry's trust triangle. If you haven't seen her TED Talk, it's fantastic. She went into a US company called Uber that was toxic and going right down the drains. She went in there to turn it around, studied 100,000 people, and found that establishing, or more importantly, reestablishing trust comes down to three fundamental things. First, authenticity. And I'll use myself as an example since I'm speaking to you. Do you believe this is the real me talking to you? Am I a phony? Am I a fake? Am I saying things that I believe? If you feel like you're experiencing the real me, you have the first level of trust. Next, do you feel like I have a sound theory of the case here? Is this logical? Does it make sense? Do you believe it? Can you follow it? And then do I care about you and your development and what you're trying to do as an organization? If you have those three things, you have some level of trust in me. Empathy is the most consistent wobble that leaders have. And that's one that most leaders need to work on. I just wrote a book called The Empathy Advantage because I think most leaders need to work on that. But these are the three fundamental things. Every leader needs to focus on these things in order to lead an organization, particularly into the unknown. So psychological safety is a term that, this Google research is more than a decade old, but it's still probably the best example out there. Google has teams running all the time working on all sorts of projects. They put teams together, they put 180 teams together, and for 2 years looked at what made for the most successful teams. The teams that could learn faster and innovate faster than anybody else. Was it collective intelligence? Was it most degrees? Was it people who knew each other? Was it same gender, different gender? Was it neurodiversity? Was it racial diversity? What was it? And it turns out the number one determinant of success was psychological safety. Can they set the conditions on the team so people feel comfortable respectfully saying, hey, I have a question. Hey, I see it differently. Hey, I need help over here. Hey, I think we're missing something. It also has to be met with dependable. Everybody on the team is accountable. Clarity of mission that you're working on. Everybody understands what you're trying to do as a team. That mission has meaning in the world, and it connects to my individual purpose. But psychological safety was paramount. Now, the reason I show this picture of a trapeze artist is because this is the world's oldest trapeze artist. She's 85 years old. This is what I think work and learning is going to feel like. We're constantly going to be leaping, hoping there's a net, hoping somebody else will catch us. Establishing psychological safety is that net. So let's talk about how we pick our leaders. It's very backwards. It's been wrong in some cases, now it's tragically wrong. So we used to pick the best technical expert, somebody who had the longest tenure. Hey, make her the president. She's been around for a while. Or he's the best salesperson. We should make him the head of sales. That doesn't really work. It never was a good idea. But now we need the best human skills, the best connector, the best coach who can bring out the best in everybody. Focus used to be on myopically driving productivity. Now it's on who can inspire potential, who can bring out the best in everybody. The value traits used to be an unquestioned expert who could make decisions in certainty. Now, most leaders are leading teams of people who have skills and knowledge they do not. If I can make a decision in certainty without questioning anybody, I'm a liability. So you need a humble, curious learner who can say the 4 scary words with me. Say them with me. I do not know. We all have to get used to saying, I don't know, let's find out. We train our leaders, we socialize our leaders to never say, I don't know. To never acknowledge, and I say acknowledge, not admit, because you admit when you murdered somebody. You don't admit when you don't know something. It's okay to not know something. It's the first step in learning. We used to motivate people with domination, fear, even sometimes humiliation. Now we need to motivate people with inspiration, caring, and love. People stay in organizations when they feel their leader cares about them. They leave organizations where they don't. We used to reward leaders only for the performance they drove today, but with this much change going on and this much churn, because people are leaving companies at a faster rate than they ever have before, we need people who can not only create the performance of today, but can develop the pipeline of talent for tomorrow. So your success as a leader is not just the performance when you were there, but the continuity of the performance after you left. So to summarize, and I'm a little ahead of schedule, from a perspective standpoint, we used to learn once in order to work. Now we're going to work in order to learn continuously. We used to try to achieve work-life balance. Now we need life-work integration. It's a mindset shift. From a behavior standpoint, we used to look for deployable workforce that was competent and compliant and always on. This hasn't been working lately. We need engaged people with self-agency who are self-propelled, who live their life in rhythm. From a mindset standpoint, we used to hire people who are I am an X with a fixed occupational identity. They were led by unquestioned experts. Now we need adaptive, curious learners led by humble, caring leaders. Our approach used to be discipline expertise through external pressure. Now it's human-machine collaboration via intrinsic motivation. And then from a cultural standpoint, we used to drive productivity with focus on the outputs, and now we need to create effectiveness through trust and psychological safety. The future of learning and leadership is not yet written. It's an unfinished narrative. We stand at a moment of profound opportunity to unleash the potential of more of us if we're brave enough to seize it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was an excellent presentation. Thank you very much. Now I have to ask you one thing. You were talking about lifelong learning.
Yeah.
How do you do that yourself?
How do I do that myself? I have a very active LinkedIn community, which I think you're in. I know Gerd's certainly in it, where people tag me in articles all the time. Sometimes they are ones that I maybe disagree with, because that's when I learn the most, is when I'm wrong or I disagree with someone. So I'm reading all the time, but I have learning communities that I'm connected in. LinkedIn's one of them, where people send me stuff all the time. So I'm reading all the time. I'm speaking at organizations all over the world. I learn from those. So I'm in constant pursuit. I love what I do because I love to learn. This is frankly exhaust from my learning, and that's how I make a living. And I think more and more people might do that. Figure out what you like to do, and then figure out who's going to buy the exhaust from what you do.
And that was actually a very good example. When we talk about lifelong learning, it's not necessarily that you take some courses, but it's constant, that you just suck information to you and more information, have discussions with interesting people and be open to new ideas.
Yes, and seek out people who don't agree with you. I mean, I could surround myself with people who do agree with me, but it's so boring. But I like to talk to people who don't agree with me.
My friend said that if two people agree, what do you do with the other one?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that was funny. Thank you very much. And actually, Janis, there, you were too close. You are going to ask further questions, and to Heather also, but from audience.
I hope that there is a questions in audience or some kind of remarks, or maybe you could share your own experience, or otherwise I will do the same as I did before. I'm going to pick one of the students in this class. So be prepared. But there is a question from Slido. So the first question or remark was, can we have extra speech from Heather today?
Can we have what?
Extra speech, one more speech from you. So, I mean, if somebody who is here, probably we are going to have extra speech at the evening, right, with a cup of tea.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, extra speech from Heather will be this cup of tea. Okay, so for Heather, but how to motivate people on going on with this mindset, take on empowerment?
I don't understand the question.
Yeah, me too. So,
I mean, I could just say something like a politician.
I mean, as far as I understand, is how you motivate, how we can motivate people to do this. What you suggest to do? How to motivate with, I don't know, with money, with what is the motivation to do so?
So There's a famous story, I think Peter Drucker is the original person who told it, called the three stone cutters. It was back in the 1950s, so it's all men. So this gentleman walks along, he sees three people cutting stone. And he says to the first person, "What are you doing?" And the first person said, "I'm cutting stone because I need a job to feed my family." Okay, goes on to the next person cutting stone, he says, "What are you doing?" And the person says, "I'm going to be the best stone carver in the world. So I'm working here to become that." He goes to the third person, and the third person says, "I'm building a cathedral to bring people together." Now, when Peter Drucker first sent that out there, people said, you really want that third person because you can always motivate that person with a higher calling. I don't think that's realistic. I think there are some people who just want a job. There are some people who want to focus on practicing a skill. There are other people who have a higher calling. You motivate all three of those people differently. So the person who just needs a job, how do you set the conditions for them to be the most successful, given that they're there just to feed their family? How do you motivate them? You connect to what they care about, which is feeding their family. The next person is, well, maybe they want to take more courses. When they want to get better at stone cutting. Maybe they may be interested in things. They may eventually go to a different job. The third person, you can connect them. They will go with your organization forever because they're called to the higher calling. You motivate all three of them differently. The third one probably has more intrinsic motivation, second and third one. But you have to understand everybody's different. Not everybody is going to live in the world I described. But we need to get as many people to as we can.
Thank you. So do we have questions from audience, please? Yes. So the brave people are here. You are going to ask question in mic, like your students do, right?
Okay, thank you, Heather. You showed the slides about demographics and also pointing out for Latvia the amount of elder people actually in the society whom we know have their beliefs, habits, the way they've led their lives. How do you see what mechanisms should be in place and how interaction with other society groups will be needed for them in order to actually go through this process? Thank you.
Are you referring to the higher levels of engagement in other parts of the world?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I think that the whole engagement thing, as well with the resilience thing. Have you guys heard the word resilience used a lot? Okay. Well, we've had this mindset that resilience means we just need to push people harder, and they need to be more disciplined. But in reality, we've ground people into a stump. We really have pushed people too hard. We have burnout. We have mental health issues. So we need to figure out how to help people focus, when to be on, what to focus on, when to be off, when to take breaks. We need leaders who don't answer or send emails on the weekends or after certain hours on the resilience front. On the engagement front, we've always done it with extrinsic pressure, punishment threats in order to get people more engaged. Instead, if we flip it and we start doing more things like job sculpting, where people are doing jobs they'd want to do if somebody wasn't paying them, it's not going to work for everybody, but it will work for some folks, we will get higher levels of engagement. Like the stat I showed earlier, the more autonomy people have at work, the more control they have over their day and how they do what they do, the higher levels of engagement we have. So those are a few different ways. Looks like a living room set has formed behind me.
Yeah, thank you. So, is there any more questions here from audience, please?
Actually, thank you for your presentation. I had a question. Perhaps you have some kind of practical example on how can we make students to think more, first of all, interdisciplinary, and maybe also take more responsibility in their younger years. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. So I spent about a decade in it's strictly in education working on exactly this problem. I did it most at the university level, but I did some research into where it happens at other levels. So at the university level in the US, we have majors, you might have concentrations. When you start school, you got to take these classes and you got to focus in this way. And the first question students ask is this going to be on the test, or am I going to be marked on this? Throw all that out. Go into the classroom and say, what impact do you want to have on the world? What are the things you need to learn to have that impact? Make the students more self-directed, more responsible for their own education, instead of telling them what they need to know and what they don't need to know, because there's no test in the world. Once you get out into work, there's no, will this be on the test? It's what you've got the motivation, which you cannot manufacture for someone to do. So set the conditions earlier. I've seen it done at a primary school where they organize children by independence level instead of age. And then every student has to work through competencies. Every student has to have fundamental literacies. Every student has a self-directed research project. And every student is responsible for teaching somebody else. So if I'm good in sciences and Dita's good in English, she will help me with my English, I'll help her with her sciences. Because in reality, we're going to be constantly focusing on collective intelligence and bringing out the performance in the people that we work with.
Thank you. So, is there any questions from audience? No. So, from a Slido, Heather, what skills actually CEOs shall look for when they're recruiting their staff? Could you just name, I don't know, from 1 to 10 or...
Yeah, so the CEOs in organizations, they're generally recruiting other people for the C-suite. And so we've had the CEOs focused on, I need a good CFO, I need a good chief technology or chief information officer. That's very important. I think increasingly we need CEOs to say, I need the best CHRO in the world, the best human resource person, because this company is going to live and die on the human performance that we have. And that's where we need to focus before anywhere else.
Okay, one more question. We know that there are introvert and extrovert people. Should they do the same as you teach? Like, I mean, is it qualifies for introverts and extroverts? Everything what we are now saying that you should do or you should learn.
Well, here's a secret. I'm an introvert. I make my living as a speaker, so when I'm off stage, I need to be by myself. But I'm on stage, I'm totally comfortable. So you'll find that people are introverted and extroverted in different ways, and let them guide. Some people with this whole work from home thing are freaked out about going back to the office 5 days a week because they're introverts, and it's just exhausting. So when you want to create the optimal human performance, you want to set the conditions on which they're going to thrive. And having people more aware about pushing people out of their comfort zone all the time, of course, but not exhausting them. We've done too much of that. Letting people rise to their highest level of potential should be our goal, not making uniform people.
Okay, and one of the last questions. So, how do you describe what will be the role of the teacher in 20 years? Not in next 5, but in 20 years.
I don't think it's going to change, and it should be what it is today. The teacher's a coach. The teacher helps you work through struggle, because that's when you learn the best. The teacher doesn't give you information that you give back or show you a skill that you repeat. You're going to do that stuff on your own. You need a teacher as a guide and as a coach that helps you when you're stuck, helps you with your outlook, helps you focus. That's what leaders and coaches, that's why I framed this talk, learning and leadership, because I think both need to change, whether the leader is a teacher or the leader is running an organization, and we are all learners.